and welcome to Mental Health Matters, Building Resilience. Today we are focusing on social media and technology's impact on the mental health of our youth. I'm excited to be here with Dr. Agnieszka Marshall, who is Tykes&Teens Chief Clinical Officer, and she is a licensed clinical psychologist, certified addictions professional, and she holds a doctorate and master's degree in clinical psychology. So thank you for being with us today. There's been a lot of studies on the amount of time that youth spend on social media, and we've seen everything from 7 hours a day on social media and other entertainment platforms. One report says that 45% of teens admit that they're online almost constantly. And another says they spend an average of 4 or more hours a day on social media. So there's lots of different studies and reports out there. What is there an optimal time that students should be spending?
You would think that there would be, like, there's some kind of a, perfect amount of hours. However, the research out there is not very clear, and part of the reason why is because we don't have a lot of longitudinal studies, so like seeing like how something impacts the child through time, mostly because a parent may not want to sign their child up to the invitation of, we're going to have your child do social media 5 hours a day for the next 5 years, and we'll see what happens. So not a lot of parents are going to sign up for that, or even on the other end of the spectrum, that your child is never going to be on social media for the next 5 years, and let's see what happens. So it's really tough to identify that. So since there isn't, that sweet spot with time, what I would recommend in identifying, limits to social media is ensure that there's first time for the things that we know are positive and healthy for the child. So like, for example, they say 8 to 10 hours of sleep is crucial for a child, and particularly a teenager. So ensure that there's enough space for that. And then of course they say an hour of exercise a day is also useful. So again, I would do it not trying to fit the day into the social media aspect, but fitting the social media aspect into the day. And then having open conversations with the child about, how might being on there for however long that child is on there, how do you think that impacts you? And, have you heard about, what the potential impact is? And having just an open conversation to that would be beneficial.
So more looking at how they're using social media as opposed to, okay, you can only be on from 4 p.m. to 5 p.m., but how they're using it.
Right. And then, parents are role models. So if you're telling your child to be on, less than 4 hours or however, and again, there's no like sweet spot to that, but how often are you on it as an adult? So, you kind of have to model the same things, but also ensuring, children report, well, I'm on it all day. And a lot of that is your notifications are on, or you can see that, that bright little number that says that you have, pending things to peek at. So maybe turning those off could be helpful to not, stay on there for extended periods of time, or having a phone in a separate room. So ensuring that there are opportunities for breaks and not that tempting, which leads us to, stay on it throughout the whole day.
Oh, I know. If you're sitting there and you see it,
right,
you feel like you have to respond right then.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. FOMO, fear of missing out. It's real. It's real. How is social media playing a part of that and the mental well-being of youth in things like self-image or bullying, cyberbullying, anxiety, depression? Does that play a part of that?
Sure, but as I mentioned before, it's difficult with the current studies because studies show that there are relationships between those things, but not necessarily causal relationships. So what they found is that social media is related to depression, anxiety, and poor body image, but exactly how that, does which come first, the chicken or the egg, that's kind of difficult to decipher because of the, what I had mentioned previously. There are doing, but what they have found is kind of what we mentioned earlier, is it's not so much being on there, but what are you using it for? So the more harmful or unhealthy elements to use social media for, it could be whether you're looking for social comparison, that's an unhealthy way of using social media, looking for validation or popularity, that's not the healthiest use of social media. And also, like, who are you following? What kind of images are you constantly showing yourself? Is the child always following the celebrities or models or things such as that? Because what they did find is, in those circumstances, the images and the things that you are exposing yourself to, that there is a causal relationship where one does lead to the other, where viewing, and they did a study on this where they did a pre-test on a person's self-image, and they had them use their social media in a particular way where they are following these certain categories of things, and then the follow-up was they did kind of a retest of their self-image, and it did go down. So they are starting to try and find that cause and effect, but the key element here is how, or the majority of the time, like, what are you doing on there? Like, how are you using it?
Right. So what advice do you have for parents and students to help find that balanced sweet spot of social media is here, your phone's here, it's not going anywhere. So what advice do you have for parents and students on how to find that sweet spot and that balance that makes it a healthy use of their time?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's actually, both positive and negative aspects to social media. So, like, for example, being able to engage in particular interests or particular groups that you might not have access to in your general area. Like, those are all great, or even using it to educate yourself and things like that. So I'm not saying you can't do any of the other things, and naughty you're so bad if you're looking for likes. But again, like, broadening your scope of why you're on there. Like I mentioned before, make sure that there's space in your day for those other things, and the other things hold precedence. For parents, there's always a question about, do I monitor, do I not monitor? Is this an encroachment in my child's privacy? I'm a proponent for monitoring, but there's certain caveats to that. So the first being is that monitoring is never going to replace a good, healthy, open relationship with your child. So communication is key. Leaving that door open to have those conversations is very, very crucial, and no amount of monitoring is going to replace that. And when I say monitoring, I always say monitor mindfully. And what that means is sometimes too much information for the parent is not very good, because that one thing that child said that's going to keep you up at night, and you're going to wonder about and ruminate, like, what does that mean and what's going on? So too much monitoring can cause parents anxiety, and then of course that's not good for anybody. The other important thing is that to note that children do sometimes have the parent-friendly accounts and the not-so-parent-friendly accounts. So know that if your child wants to hide something, they're going to. So know that, again, monitoring isn't gonna fix it all.
So keeping that conversation open sounds like it's a very important part of it.
Yeah, and the other aspect of it is that people don't realize is being aware of how addictive things like that are, whether it's social media or that screen time in general. There's a lot of different reasons why it is so addicting for us. So particularly for children, because during the teenage years, the brain is almost set up perfectly to for that desire of recognition. Now, we all like recognition, right? But the teenage brain during that period of development, like, it is more prone to really have that those feel-good chemicals be released when that happens. So those likes and those comments are very, very addictive to that teenage brain. So just being aware of that and the reality of it.
All good stuff. Well, thank you for joining us today. Thank you to Children's Services Council of Martin County for supporting our prevention efforts. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Mental Health Matters. Thank you and have a wonderful week.